Yeah, that's okay. Let me tell you why. He's the best there is. What he does and what he does is fucking fabulous. That's okay. Wolverine is gay. On the moon with Cyclops, just being extra gay. Wolverine is gay. Bub.
The only way that you can really stop this kind of thing is to arouse public opinion. It's very upsetting. It has a bad moral effect.
Forced adversity.
When I was a kid, it was too much supper. Now it's comic books.
I'll burn them tomorrow.
Bad, B-A-D-D, bothered about Dungeons and Dragons.
Ask yourself, what's more terrifying? Fear or the frightened?
I think there ought to be a law against them. Tonight I'm going to show you why.
Tonight, I am not going to show you why. Sorry, I'm just not. But who is Morgan. Hello.
I will indeed be showing you why.
And Ryan is here. And yeah. All right, we are getting started, folks. We're going to try and keep it I don't know what contained.
Yeah, speed run.
It's not going to be like the Comics Code, any of the Comics Code, several episodes or offshoots that we did of that. Pretty focused here.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is a Force Diversity podcast, and if you're new, where you been? But also welcome. And what we do is we talk about people being kind of weird about stuff. Just when you look back on it, it's like, hey man, what were you thinking? Like, chill the fuck out.
And not just weird, like aggressively weird, and they try and make it everyone else's problem.
Yep. And sometimes it works like a little too well, and people end up suffering because of that. And this is definitely one of those cases where
yes, this is definitely one of those. This does not go great for a lot of people for a long time, but there is a happy ending at the end.
And we all love a happy ending at the end.
We do love a happy ending. So today we're talking about the Lavender Scare. And I'm sure some of you have heard about Red Scare. In fact, if you've listened to Ryan's excellent episode on the Red Scare in the House American Activities Committee, this is a corollary to that. Happens at the same time, involving some of the same assholes. But we're taking a look at not just the government being used to go after communists, but gays and lesbians and people who in the 50s people thought were gays and lesbians, because America do be homophobic that way.
Wait, so there's not like a surefire or signifier of this?
Not today. No, they just sort of call someone gay.
Oh,
yeah. It's very like middle school, but for decades and with national consequences. And
It's
real
it's
life consequences.
Imagine, and this is what we're talking about when we talk about like people acting silly and weird over virtually nothing and nothing. And like, it's basically like the entire government and society was looking around at everybody, calling them the F word, like, kid in middle school or something.
Basically exactly that.
Cringe. So
before we dig all the way in, I want to shout out the primary source for this speedrun overview of the Lavender Scare, and that is David K. Johnson's 2004 book, The Lavender Scare, where he goes into great detail, and it is a very interesting book. I recommend it.
And so I imagine we'll get into like the mechanisms for making sure that like this isn't something that's really taught or talked about much.
No, this really, we talk about the Red Scare a lot, even to this day, and things are called a new Red Scare all the time. But in truth, a lot of what we think of as the Red Scare, as far as the firings and the blacklistings at the federal level, were an effect of calling people gay. And there were a lot of, gay people who were, removed from their jobs and blacklisted by the government during this stretch of time. But also early on, it is definitely a bit of a red herring.
Yeah.
So,
all
right. But before we get into that, we do need to do a brief history of homosexuality as far as humans go, because I think when we talk about queer folks in a political context, we think more contemporarily, and we're going to actually throw back all the way to the Stone Age, which is where we have our first records of homosexual humans based on some cave paintings, where the historical record begins to note intersex and transgender people roughly 10,000 years ago, which is about the time that we invented beer. Before that, it's a dark time. We don't want to talk about it, especially here in Wisconsin.
Oh God. Yeah. So beer and the gays came about at the same time. Are they related at all, or?
Yeah. Well, the gays created the beer. That's okay. If you like alcohol, think a gay person. So 7,000 years later, we have our first records of laws against homosexuality in Assyria. And about the same time, we get Greek accounts of both lesbian and gay relationships, with the words lesbian and sapphic, which is used to describe two females in a romantic relationship, being derived from the island of Lesbos, home to the Greek poet Sappho, who wrote about women in relationships.
Well, okay.
Yeah. And so throughout history, you have different sort of, and in different places, obviously, different levels of social acceptability for queer folks. Some of these ranged from icky and gross to weird and oxymoronic and all sorts of fun things, but it's ebbed and flow over time is the TLDR. And that's sort of, well, anti-queer and anti-homophobic or anti-homosexual laws kind of hit their peak as far as what we see the origin of the modern anti-queer movements is Christianity. I'm sorry, Mark. Yeah, so the first laws weren't, but Christians do be hating some gay people.
Yeah, I mean, the first laws weren't right because that was like before Christians came along.
It was before there were Christians. So the first laws, no Christians.
But then
not
like
around.
Post Christians, like, yeah, a lot of them. A lot of
them. Boy, howdy, they do be hating some gays. And
Mark really must be Catholic to just punish himself by listening to this podcast.
I guess so. Poor guy. So while Christians are not the only religion to persecute LGBT folks, they are the dominant one in American history and culture. And so we're going to be kind of focusing on them. So they sort of blend the Jewish prohibition on homosexual relationships with Roman imperialism. And as the Roman Empire begins to fall, several Roman emperors take to blaming what they call effeminate men, which is code for gay people, for the weakness of the empire. There's sort of a recurring story that plays out that several emperors burn down pagan temples where effeminate men do rituals. And this plays out over 100 years in what is likely a propaganda campaign. They likely did burn down some temples, but this idea of the emperor walking into a place and ordered it burned down seems to recur the same way enough that it is likely apocryphal some of the time, because they needed to look like they're doing something without doing anything. The concept of the buck stops here isn't invented for another 1,500 years or so, so the emperors just kind of found a scapegoat to blame.
Yeah, as emperors do.
As emperors are wont to do. So, let's see. So, despite all of these religiously motivated purges, Rome, spoiler alert, still fell. Actually, a couple of times. Rome falls for a while. We sort of think of one day there was Rome and then one day there was not Rome. But Rome splits into two, and then one side falls, and then the other side falls, and it's a whole deal. So this did not stop Christians from purging not just gay people, but Jewish people, the Moors, which were Islamic people, the wrong Christians eventually, sort of the Cathars and the Protestants and the Orthodox and the Gnostics. And yeah, they love finding some people to purge and then purging them. This goes on till the present day. So when we're talking about, this is a live segment, Gerald, welcome. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, we almost never, we do like a pre-stream record, like a, little thing for a few minutes usually, but I don't think I really ever do recorded live streams. It is possible. There is an option in StreamYard, but welcome. Welcome.
So the first anti-sodomy law in America dates back to 1610. So over 150 years before there is anything that resembles the United States of America. This is in the colonial period, which is Ryan's fault, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, I
was colonized as well, so don't blame me.
That's fair. That's fair.
I did grab some examples of what was going on over in in the UK at this time. By the way, just so that Ryan can't get away with any of his we're superior than about this specific example.
No, unfortunately, in this respect, we were not the more enlightened place.
Nope. F's in chat for Alan Turing.
Oh yeah, lots of F's.
Yeah, who won World War II and then was killed for it.
Well, so that, speaking of World War II, you said something a minute ago, and this is really going to be my main contribution as far as anything here. Mm-hmm. But and by the way, I should mention this, Thursday this week, the initiative is doing Friends of Garrick fundraiser live stream, celebrating, exploring, probably criticizing some of the representation of LGBTQ people and themes in Star Trek. Back from all the way back, in I guess, kind of Kirk's, love with himself, I suppose, to more modern times when it's actually not just allegory, and it's not like it's not, they're not hiding behind anything. There's actually trans and non-binary characters and stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, we'll be looking at all that and doing a fundraiser for the Trevor Project. It's going to be me, Turf Nation, Eric Debunks, Eric's Reloaded, and Organized Chaos, and hopefully probably some guests and whatnot. And so anyway, I was curious about the Friends of Garrick thing. It was that comes from I think Friends of Dorothy,
Yep.
And I was wondering where that came from, and I just assumed it was a slur, and it wasn't.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's from the gay community, and like
Yep.
the earliest recording, like known use of it, was in World War II, and it was like soldiers would be like, "Oh, are you a friend of Dorothy?" And whenever they wanted to like kind of identify each other, right?
It's friend of Dorothy or friend of Judy, because it's Judy Garland who played Dorothy.
No, it's Dorothy.
It's both.
Okay, and there's also something about Mrs. King I saw.
Oh, that one I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
It is interesting.
And also be there Thursday for that live stream.
I will be there listening at the very least, and maybe I can make a guest appearance.
Sweet.
All right,
back to our programming.
Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So while this is the first recorded anti-sodomy law, it's important to note that America does not have, once it's a government, the United States does not have a federal criminalization of same-sex relationships. Though at the start of our story, every state does. And the only federal prohibition was in the military. The other thing is that these anti-sodomy laws are written to be broadly applied to all forms of sodomy, but really it's just used to target gay and lesbians. So, and as far as those state laws, to give you an idea of how little progress America has made and how it's easy to lose sight of that, those sodomy laws, some of those were still in place and enforced until they were struck down by the Supreme Court in 2003.
Yeah, being from Texas, born and raised, unfortunately.
No, we don't hold that against you.
And honestly, I'm not like regretful of it because it's given me a lot of insight.
Right.
So, anyway, but yeah. So I remember specifically seeing on the news. I don't remember what year it was, late 90s, I guess, when it's like that that law had finally been struck down in Texas, or maybe it was early 2000s. And I was
2003. Yeah, Texas was one of the ones that had held out.
Okay.
And there are people on the Supreme Court today who would like to undo that decision.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I bet. The same ones who have already undone some other long-standing decisions. But yeah, I was just like kind of fucking astonished that was ever even a thing. That like, wait, how are they even policing that? Of course they weren't really. It was just more like
someone would have to rat you out.
Right.
And that brings us to friend of the podcast from the great villainous state of Wisconsin, the second Red Scares poster boy, Joseph McCarthy, who we're going to discuss a little bit now and a little bit later, but I don't want to get too deep into him because I think it's important to talk about the systemic things that enabled the panic rather than just talk about the guy we talk about is, oh, this is the person who did it. And whose name gets associated with all of these things the American government did in the 50s, but he's kind of a scapegoat in a lot of ways, even though he did it and he perpetuated it.
His tenure was short and his stuff went on a lot longer than him.
Right, a lot longer.
I mean, you can look at his meaty fist right there in the image in the screen, and you can just tell he's not long for this world.
No. So he famously had his list of communists in the American government, and swore to root them out. Well, here's the problem with that. That can be kind of hard to prove that someone is a communist.
Do you think that's kind of a flaw in the design of like accusing the people that, right? It's not like a feature.
I mean, it is a feature because I mean they would just call anyone to the left of Joseph McCarthy, including Eisenhower. Joseph McCarthy famously called Eisenhower a communist, and that's one of the things that sort of led to his downfall. Even though Eisenhower goes along with all of this and enables it, and we'll talk about him in a bit. But But what they could do is call you gay. And this goes back to that, the Roman tactic of these effeminate men rooting our empire. Because there is nothing new under the sun.
Right.
And even before World War II and before the Cold War, homosexuality was at the very best frowned upon in the federal government. But in most cases, gay people were drummed out of any government jobs long before McCarthy was involved in this process. That was seen as a weakness and a mental illness, and we're going to get into that right now. So, at the time, the American Psychiatric Association and the medical establishment considered being gay a mental illness. And you get this sort of vicious cycle where we don't want mentally ill people in the government because that's just the prevailing attitude at the time. This is, I like to think of the current era of mental health treatment as the bone saws era. This is before that. We look at mental illness at this time as something that is very difficult to treat, and typically mentally ill people are locked away.
Yeah, then there was also like the lobotomizations and everything.
Yep. And the medical establishment at this time is still very much informed by the eugenicists of the early 20th century. And so, not great. And so the government didn't want those people because they were mentally ill in the government. But of course, being gay is not a mental illness. And you are a perfectly normal person other than this one thing that people don't like about you. And so they would hide it. Which means you're undermining the government.
Circular logic there.
And so it also, in their mind, meant that you were more likely to be a secret communist. Because some vocal communists were pro gay rights, some were not. Or that even if you weren't a secret communist, because you had the secret, you were more vulnerable to being blackmailed.
Right. That was what I was, I guess, not surprised, but yeah, it was interesting to learn that part.
So this was the apparatus they used to drum people out of government jobs, including in the military, because it's a lot easier to prove in some ways, but also because they're not going to watch you do it. None of these people are, voyeurs that way. Well, some of them are, but we're not getting into individuals too much. And this was exacerbated by two sort of competing factors you had right in the post-war period. The first is that the wartime environment in America led to this interesting thing. And we've sort of touched on it before with like our episode on Jackie Robinson, of how there was more integration in a more united society and a more open society because we were sort of a united front. And things like baseball brought us together. At this time, you also have a lot of women in the workplace. And this also meant that, especially in urban areas, there was just more room for openly gay and lesbian communities to spring up. Which is rad. But then you have this other little thing, which is that there was this national push, both as a opposition to communism and this attempt to return to normalcy after the war, was to enforce gender norms and nuclear families and that sort of, lifestyle. And so this newly visible gay community clashed with this real conservative push we had after the war, and it led to some pretty serious tensions. And sort of it created the environment for this to really kick off and enable thousands of people to lose their job. Thousands of people to lose their livelihood, because if you get into that sort of work, it's hard to like find another field to work in, and you've got that mark next to your name, and it's sort of hard to escape. And also, as our federal government kicks off all of these anti-gay actions, that spreads to the states as well, and so we'll get into that a little bit too. So,
well, can I ask?
Of course.
What was the general? I mean, I know there's not really a way to quantify this or accurately, but I guess what was the mood prior to this? Like, it's just general socially, like not outside of government stuff. I imagine this was when it was just like hush hush, like nobody really talked about it, right?
Yeah, no one really talked about it. And it could get you in trouble, especially depending on where you were in the country. But
so like when it was talked about, it was probably like sexual perversion, like in the comics code, right?
Right, exactly. And it was something that if you were caught, you'd probably be punished, whether it was job lost or in some places like that had anti-sodomy laws, which was everywhere. You would go down for that, legally speaking, but there wasn't any active witch hunts before this.
Okay.
It does occur to me, though, that there's a weird thing happening in society at this time in both our countries, where a return to, I guess, or the establishment of these family values, the ostracization of unmarried couples, etc., etc. And I'm assuming it was the same in the US, but you couldn't basically get a house as a married couple if you weren't a married couple.
Right.
Banks wouldn't give you a mortgage or whatever, which creates this weird situation where if you are a gay couple, you're actually less
incredibly hard. Yeah.
Well, you're less judged as if you're obviously in the closet, not openly gay, but if you're gay or lesbian at this time, if you're keeping up the pretense that you're just two straight pals looking for a place together, it would actually be less socially frowned upon for you to live together than it would a man and a woman who weren't married.
Right.
Obviously that's...
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Obviously, that's not ideal because you're still forced to hide your true identity for like the moment you step outside the four walls of your house. But
right,
yeah, it's just an interesting unintended consequence of this incredibly puritanical society that was developing.
Right, and you even had the weird thing with like newly married couples could also have that same housing circle, right? Where like you need to be married to get a house, but you need a place to raise a family, and where then you've got to find an apartment or something for a little while, and then that's a problem that's continued on sort of based on this system. So even this sort of 1950s nuclear family ideology spawns kind of our current housing issues.
But so I'm looking right here, and that says that's a Democrat.
So that's
the resolution. Are you telling me that the Democrats are actually the bigots?
Everyone is the bigots in this. If you are in the halls of power at this time,
yeah, it's true. It's
true.
It's also pre Southern strategy. So
right, you've got the pre-Southern strategy issue. You've got just this sort of united front against communism, in that the far right Republicans and Democrats were pretty good at bullying their more liberal counterparts in both parties into going along with it, or they would target them out to be primaried or to run against, and it made you an easy target.
May I explain real quick just to end two here? You infamous around here for making like what kind of comments? So earlier he said that Americans never really took anything too seriously in the 50s.
What?
Yeah, which I said, what? And then he said they called gay people child molesters in the 50s. These two statements are incongruent. And then I said, but you said people didn't take things seriously. Then they didn't. And it's just like, man, I don't know where you're coming from half the time. I really don't. I try to. I really do. I don't mean to call you out, but holy shit, man.
Yeah. So W&G fan, there were conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats before Nixon. It just meant different things.
Yep. Nixon was the one that came in and he had a lot of racial bias. Well,
and Barry Goldwater tried that before him. It just didn't quite come together.
Well, and as we're going to talk about whenever we eventually, we haven't covered them yet. No, the John Birch Society.
Yep.
They were on the scene starting now at this point in history, and they were
where they're kicking
beginning
off.
to have some influence. And and there's kind of this false record of history that people are kind of realizing now that the narrative was that they were kind of purged from Republican thought. And that doesn't seem to have been the case. That it's kind of
it is not
poison in the veins ever since, and now it's making itself known.
Now it's terminal.
Yep.
It's amazing to me as a foreigner just how many different sociological wars that America was fighting in the post-war period, when you had probably the most economically prosperous time in your history, sort of the beginning of becoming a global superpower. I mean, you're fighting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the attitude was, we need to make sure this never stops. So we need to never let anybody else have the wealth that we have now, and the rights that we have. Like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
It is. So there was like a big push to freeze it in fucking amber, and
right.
So you had segregation and the Red Scare, and as we're finding out, the Lavender Scare, and everything else that was going on at the time. I don't know, and I'm sure this may be something we wish to talk about, but I don't know what the states of women's rights were in the 50s, whether that even existed as a concept.
So we were post the suffrage movement, so they could vote. Yeah. But they typically couldn't have their own bank account, couldn't have credit. So not great.
Yeah.
Still very much anti single mothers, which seems insane after a war where a lot of young men died and a lot of them were fathers. And we were still very anti-single mother, like, come the fuck on.
Yeah, it's absurd.
But we abuse veterans in our families to this day, so
we need to probably do a series on the forced adversity against native population of continental U.S.
Boy, howdy, that could be a whole series. Yeah,
it could be a whole podcast.
It could be. So, back to this shit show. So this created a link. Well, I can talk. This created a link between communism and homosexuality, in that they both were seen as subversive, and they you had this vicious cycle of like, gays can be blackmailed by communists or are more likely to be communists, and so they're subversives. They don't follow the traditional family values that we're making up right now. And so you also had the sort of second feedback loop where, because being homosexual made you anti-American, just as far as the act of being or the existence of a homosexual is anti-American to the broad part of the populace at this point. This made gay people more likely to actually be anti-American because, I mean, what the fuck?
Oh,
Like
almost
you-
whenever you like demonize an entire group of people, that it kind of makes them not like you, and it's
They
almost
don't
like
like
a
you.
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right, exactly, which is also part of the strategy. And because of this, and sort of because homosexuality was treated as a disease and a subversive one, you get some familiar messaging. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar to you. Because homosexuality is a disease and there is no apparent vector, but there are all of these gay people that the government is suddenly concerned about, it must be contagious. And because it's this is the words that was used at the time, tell me if this one sounds familiar, a social contagion that had to be contained, it heightened the need to out potential homosexuals in the government, to both remove the subversives and to prove that you weren't one of them. So if I thought Ryan, if I am someone in the Eisenhower administration and I hear a rumor, I get a report that Ryan is gay, and Ryan goes, I'm not gay, and I go, prove it. Well, he'll say, oh, Dane is gay.
I mean, this is like schoolyard stuff.
Right, but this is what's happening.
I'm not a F slur. He's an F slur.
Exactly.
And I was, I guess just like if somebody said prove it, you couldn't just go, all right, give me a lady to have sex with or something like that.
Right.
Oh, God damn it.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. I mean, it was stupid then. It's stupid that it's happening again. The language adjusts to a degree, and it's
Do you want to hear why it's way worse than that? Because we know it was stupid then, and they knew it was stupid then, and they knew it was stupid, but they did it anyways.
It's true. And a base comment there too.
It is. So in 1957, the Navy finished a internal report called the Crittenden Report, which was the result of a several year long research study done into the risks homosexuals posed to the United States Navy. Now, what do you guys think it found?
I'm thinking about how can't believe there was a time whenever they were worried about homosexuals in the Navy. Instead of just being we're the gay one,
Yeah, my first instinct was, really, the Navy, the gayest of the armed forces?
Yeah, like they basically their motto at this point, we're the gay one,
Everyone loves a sailor.
So what do you guys think? Did the Navy, what did they find out about homosexuals and the risk?
That there were none in there. There were
literally none.
Zero.
Yeah. It concluded that there was no sound basis for the belief that homosexuals posed any security risk. Not only that, they concluded that it's probably not a mental illness. They could find no evidence that they were cognitively impaired in any way, shape, or form.
Well, see, Mark, that's a reasonable thing to assume, maybe, but Wortham is singled out in history for that because he was a single guy who went so against the scientific method.
Yep.
Whereas the Navy, presumably, even then we were putting money into the military and stuff.
A lot
I
of
imagine there were actually science-driven people who understood how to look into these things.
So the Navy obviously jumped on and made everyone aware of their findings, right?
Right.
I got some bad news for you. This
So
was hidden
they just
from
sat on the results, or what?
Well, the Department of Defense hid the results. Yeah. Its existence wasn't discovered until 1976, and it wasn't until the 80s that we had a full idea of what it actually said through several Freedom of Information Act requests. So the United States government knew that this was bullshit, basically from the beginning. But because of our political and social conservatism, we fucking hit it to placate zealots.
Man, is there any modern example of that kind of thing happening?
Well,
I'm
I was just thinking.
Sarcastic, I think. I'm just wondering.
No, well, I was just thinking. It occurs to me that all these sort of conspiracy-minded people who think the government's hiding all this information from them, if this was the type of information that was genuinely being hidden and it came out, I can't help thinking a lot of those people would suddenly change their tune about conspiracies.
Right. Yeah, no, I have to imagine that they would be. This wouldn't move their needle at all, right? Like, some of them maybe. Like, it's so many different people become conspiracy theorists, and in the age before the reemergence of the conspiracy in the form of QAnon, you had all of these disparate conspiracies, left, right, and center, and now they've sort of homogenized into one.
I kind of disagree that they wouldn't care about it at all. They would use it. They wouldn't care about like what it actually meant. And they wouldn't care about the victims of it or anything, but they would use it as like, see, even and then they would just kind of throw that into a pile with the rest of their half thoughts.
Yeah. It wouldn't change their mind on the results of the study. Wouldn't change their mind as to the rest of their conspiracy around gay people.
Nope.
It would just be like, oh, this just reinforces that we're correct somehow.
Right. Kind of like how, like right now, they're doing a lot of this, think of the children when it comes to trans people and stuff. And it's like, I mean, unrelated, but it does have to do with, might as well say, give a shout out to our muse of the podcast. Saw a guy yesterday on Twitter, going around just trolling trans people.
Yep.
Saying, leave kids alone or whatever. And I happen to look at his profile and he's retweeting, Ethan Van Sciver, who, I don't know, go look at my Twitter. There's I'm not, and this isn't me like making implication that he's like some kind of a PDF file or whatever, but he's definitely said some yikes stuff in the past that just like, if you, care about kids, you're not going to be blindly supporting a guy like that who,
Well, I'm going to skip forward a little bit because you brought it up, but we got some of that in the States with this, because as I said before, the federal lavender scare into homosexuals in the government spread down to state and local governments. And so there is a famous example in Florida where they launched a 8-year investigation to find all of the gay teachers and fire them from public schools.
I saw that. Yeah, the Florida had their own little lavender scare.
Do you know what the justification? One of the justifications for specifically getting gay teachers out of the system?
I mean, I can take a guess, but go ahead.
It's think of the children. Yep, and yeah, Lucifer writing is it's not just Florida. This thing is happening everywhere at this time, but this Florida offensive at the time is certainly one of the
more aggressive,
the more aggressive, and not targeting people in administrative positions, because in a lot of places it's targeting people in your state executive branch or your like county and municipal governments.
So it's kind of like Florida, like, you know, I don't know. Yeah, Florida just was ahead of the curve.
Right, ahead of their own curve.
But yeah, since you mentioned it, I do have to.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
No.
But also, it kind of like, at least in the broad sense, it doesn't. I don't get a sense of that so far with the government aspect of this, right? I mean, like, ultimately that's included in the panic, right? That's always included, but like it's not the tip of the spear of the panic, so to speak.
No, the tip of the spear is that homosexuals are subversives trying to overthrow the government, and either communists in league with the communists or blackmailable by the communists. It is the federal level, and in lots of other states, it is not a think of the children thing. It is a overthrowing democracy is the
So
screen.
Is this the first one that we've done? Well, I guess not the Red Scare too. So like the Red Scare, not really think of the children ones.
Yeah,
I'll have to think about it another time. But yeah,
right. We have done a lot of
notable
children ones.
It's notable when it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it is notable. The Jackie Robinson is also not a think of the children.
True.
That is just old-fashioned racism.
Yeah, this is your classic national security scare rather than.
And all of these were in the 50s too.
Yeah. For those who have seen the movie Clue, there's a reference to this, is that the blackmail on one of the people in that movie is that they're gay, and that's why he's being blackmailed by Mr. Body, is because that would be bad for his career in the federal government. So, also, if you haven't seen Clue, once we're done here, go watch Clue. It's amazing.
Well, you know, maybe we should do, because I've been thinking, like, we really should do some movie nights.
We should do some movie nights.
And didn't you propose the other day what's going to be coming out soon that we could be watching?
I know I proposed it, but my brain is...
Some show that's going to be starting soon.
Star Trek?
Was it?
I mean, Strange New World starts in a couple of weeks, so that's where my brain is at when it comes to TV.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we will. All right, where was I? All over my notes at this point.
Secret Invasion.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
That's actually kind of the perfect show.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, all right. We'll
Mark,
talk about it and get back with you.
I award you 1 point, spend it wisely. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that and set that up. That'll be rad. So, at the... as this is developing within the Senate, and within the federal government as a whole, it really became a tool to undermine a functioning government at the benefit of elected politicians who just want to keep their power. Because they want to have the say, and they will find anyone they can blame or scapegoat on to make themselves seem important and indispensable to their constituents without having to do anything for their constituents, right? They're making government actively worse by firing what are career bureaucrats, right? People who are just 9 to 5, well, probably more than 9 to 5 at this time of history, but people who are working for a salary in the government, and this is them being rooted out for doing nothing, making the government less efficient while making the individual politicians seem like they're doing something for the people. This is sort of one of the earliest examples I'm familiar with of the conservative ploy to break government, say government is the problem, to get reelected to break government more.
Which is basically just all they do now.
It's all they do now. I have a question for you, Ryan. How was I know that definitely that in this time period that the UK wasn't exactly a queer friendly place. Was the UK's government sort of on this same kick, or did it manifest in different ways?
No, it definitely manifested in different ways. We were still rationing until the early 50s, so we really suffered from the Second World War.
Right.
For probably a decade afterwards. Really didn't start getting ourselves back on our feet until the mid 50s. So we had sort of more pressing concerns. Our governments couldn't, they couldn't use this sort of thing as a distraction from real issues. B, we actually had probably the most socialist government we'd had before or since, who
right.
were bringing in
you get
things
the
that,
NHS, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's right in that sort of window. So in that respect, it wasn't such a feature, but homosexuality was still illegal right up until 1967. So it just, there was no political will to sort of do anything about it. Not because they didn't necessarily see it as a problem, but it wasn't a big problem.
Right.
We didn't have the Red Scare because communism wasn't seen as the boogeyman for us.
Right.
So nobody really socially had the feeling that politics was being undermined by that. But then we also had some sort of political scandals. You had, I don't know if you've heard of the Cambridge Spies.
No.
Yeah, there were a group of 5 men who were active Russian agents that were at Cambridge University together. So that really sort of didn't help the more conservative politicians, because these were all people who should have been the well-educated, rich people. So it's very hard to go after homosexuality as the thing that is the danger to your government when it's actually posh boys from Oxbridge universities. So
right.
So yeah, I mean, as I said, societally, not friendly towards homosexuality, but not actively fighting against it either.
Right. Okay, cool. Good to know. So President Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10450 at this time to make it look like he is doing something about the homosexual menace. And this barred homosexuals from working in the federal government. At the time this was enacted, it removed roughly 5,000 people from their jobs, and it publicly outed them as gay or lesbians, and had a lot of collateral damage beyond that, because this was used to justify a whole campaign of internal affairs investigations into the lives of both potential civil servants and present ones to find even guilt by association. It wasn't just like, oh, you could be married with children, but if your brother is gay, well, then you could be gay. You could be a secret gay. And so it just sort of spiraled out. And this goes on. It just inspired those state and local policies that we talked about, which again displaced more people from employment and undermined the efficacy of government. I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry, guys. But just created this air of you can't trust your coworkers. it isolates people and just is a witch hunt, right? It's just the social ills of a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, good fun stuff.
Well, and just the ramifications that it's had.
Go on forever. They go on until real recently. Even after, so we had that Navy study that was hidden that said this was all bullshit. By 1956, so we're 2 years into this whole thing. And several studies have now shown that there is no causal relationship between being a homosexual and being mentally ill. There was a correlation between being homosexual and developing mental illness, but that was a result of treatment by society.
Same thing with trans people, right? And they
Right.
like to they do acknowledge the link often, people today, but they misapply the direction that goes. You know. So it's yeah, once again, same old story.
Yep, it just plays out over and over again. Amusingly, though, this does undermine the military.
Yeah.
So all of these warhawks, they kick off this little party in Vietnam.
Oh. Little footnote in history. Yeah.
Little footnote in history. It lasts, I don't know, a decade and a half. Real fun pile of war crimes, the Vietnam War. And one of the most infamous uses of, conscription in American history, though the world has a lot of history of that, but I think everyone here is familiar with the Vietnam War draft, and the steps people would take to get around it. But one of the things that you could do is, remember how you couldn't work in the military? There was always a prohibition, or for a long time there was a prohibition on serving in the military if you were gay.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell, right?
Well, this is before that.
Oh,
that's in the 90s. We don't get don't ask, don't tell until the mid 90s.
I think this was the era of ask and then get kicked out.
And then
I think
get kicked out.
Yeah, you could
so
legitimately
just lie
ask
if you want to stay in, basically.
Well, yeah, you could legitimately ask people if they were a homosexual.
Right. And if they didn't tell you, it was a crime. Like,
yes.
if they told you, no, I'm not, and then they got caught, then that was a crime. You would be court-martialed. Of course, if you're trying to dodge a draft, just declare your enjoyment of good old vitamin D on your draft card, because Uncle Sam hates vitamin D.
I guess like that was kind of like a fortunate kind of benefit for some people, I imagine.
Yeah,
although I imagine declaring that would have to have some consequences in your life generally.
Yeah,
if
but if you're looking for a quick out, that was a quick out.
The other option was bone spurs in your feet.
Right. Yeah. Well,
or to
you
shit
needed
your
a doctor
pants,
for
like
that.
Ted
And a lot of people couldn't afford a doctor, right? You had to get a doctor to say, "Oh no, you can't serve."
I just wanted to highlight Ted Nugent shit his pants.
Again, continues to this day, and he shits out of his mouth too.
Sorry, Ryan.
I was just going to ask, what if you declared yourself to be gay to get out of the draft? I guess this is happening at draft centers in small towns, and so that's how they there was no concept of privacy, and so it would get out that you said you were gay to dodge the draft.
Right.
Probably.
But if your draft center is in an urban area, right, you're just another person, right? Who the hell is going to know? It's probably not going to get back to anyone you're worried about. So the feasibility of this was really dependent on, as far as secondary consequences, where you were in the country. Which probably meant that we killed a lot more. We sent a lot of our more rural-born Americans over there to die anyways.
Because that's what we do.
Yeah. Conscription is bad, folks. Don't do it. Forcing your kids to do war crimes, not great.
Fortunately, we don't have the draft anymore. We just kind of have like almost like a second-hand kind of draft where it's like you're just born poor. So what are your options? Well,
right.
There's that. But guess what? It's also kind of a scam in a lot of cases. A lot of people don't really end up much better. So
yeah, well, especially when it comes to like, I have some friends and family who are veterans, and it makes me hate Republicans more.
Same.
Because
my brother is a soldier. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Republicans regularly vote to cut veterans benefits and GI Bill loans and tuition reimbursement, and
yet they will absolutely use them as like they're the heroes and they're patriots and they're
right.
like use them as props. It's fucking disgusting.
Same thing with VA hospitals are always getting their funding targeted by the right. So yeah,
or they're getting the CEO of comic book companies operating them for some reason.
Yeah. I hate everything. Yeah, so Republicans are awful, I guess, is the moral of this story. So we do see some rollbacks in this after several decades. In the 70s, the sort of broad prohibition against gay people working in the federal government that isn't the military is not lifted, but ignored. Carter just forgets about it for a while. It becomes unenforced, sort of on and off over the next few decades. As far as that executive order. Of course, once you get a conservative president, Reagan, Bush, the other Bush, it turns back on suddenly. Funny that. As far as in the military, we get Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the 90s, which was Clinton's compromise position, which was that it's still illegal to be gay, but no one can ask you about it. So you would have to get caught in the act, basically, which still happened. It wasn't until 2017 that Barack Obama repeals the executive order that Eisenhower put in place. So this policy was in effect for almost 70 years. And so when you're talking about the Red Scare, we think of this period in the 50s where a single witch hunter wages a campaign over a couple of years until his liver does the heroic thing and kills him. But this policy that is pinned on Joseph McCarthy, rightly so, in some ways, is really a big systemic issue.
There's no way McCarthy could have accomplished all this just on his own.
Say again?
There's no way McCarthy could have accomplished this on his own.
Right.
This had to be an entire system acting, in coordination to make this shit happen. So was it something like tens of thousands of jobs lost?
I mean, we know like that first wave is 5,000, and then we don't really have good numbers over the next 75 years.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, obviously McCarthy, big piece of shit, but yeah, I mean, it's been really pretty, I guess, crucial thing to learn doing this podcast, just how much he, kind of gets propped up as like, this is the guy, this is him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same as like with Frederick Wortham, for example, who kind of was just the guy at first, right?
And I think that's an interesting comparison in this era because we're sort of talking about the same period initially. That like he was the driving factor of that, where McCarthy, while a driving factor, was one of several, but he's the one we talk about. And I think a lot of whitewashing goes on because the government wants to appear clean in all of this. And Lucifer has it right once again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Lucifer's not even American, right? Like, you constantly.
Well, Americans are undereducated, especially when it comes to their own political history.
True. It's not like Ryan. He's constantly getting stuff wrong about America. Jesus.
Ryan knows more about America than the whole rest of my family.
Yeah, I know. It's ironic that we brought him on originally to, like, hey, this guy is going to know about what happened in UK. It's like, but he's also extremely fucking knowledgeable about our history as well. So
Ryan's just cool like that.
He is.
Well, speaking of which, I wanted to ask you one thing, which is I guess it's more of a social thing. But are you familiar with the term Polari?
No.
Right. Well, I just wanted to mention, because we were talking about how sort of the culture was in the UK, and I know Dane said he'd done some research, but Polari is basically a secret language that sort of developed from it's like a mix of Italian and slang, sort of rhyming slang, and it developed amongst traveling people, but then moved on to different subcultures, but was most predominant in gay subcultures.
Yeah.
So they could speak to each other without fear of discovery as a homosexual.
Right.
And it's just really interesting because I've never heard it be mentioned in America. So I was wondering if anything did exist like this within American culture.
Sure. I read about the gay language kind of thing.
I don't know that it has a name like that, but there is definitely a language that exists. Sort of conceal that type of conversation.
Because, like you were saying about the Friends of Dorothy, that was sort of a signifier that people could use to identify each other. And if nobody, if the person you're speaking to was sort of blank looking,
you knew, right?
Then you knew, yeah. Unless they happen to have a friend called Dorothy, which is a slight flaw in the plan, but
yeah, I know Dorothy. Oh shit! Wait, you actually know a Dorothy?
But what's interesting about Polari is how many words have come over from this sort of gay subculture to modern vernacular. Just a couple. AC/DC, meaning bisexual.
Right.
And it's where using bitch as a term for within the gay community for a gay man comes from.
That makes sense.
But also, there's some which then sort of transcend the gay community. Bear with me a second. I'm just trying to find one that.
And a lot of that stuff.
Hoofer is one. I don't know if you have this expression in the US, but for a dancer, you say someone's a hoofer.
Oh, no, I've never heard that before.
Another one, which I know is specific to British slang, is Kazi for toilet. And I'm sure there's some that do cross over cultural
probably
boundaries. And again, it's just a question of weeding them out. So,
right.
Interestingly, one of the ones for the word for sex, the word they used for sex change was remold.
Oh, that makes sense.
Zhuzh, that's the one that I think has made its way into American gay subculture, meaning to make something smart. I know it's commonly used. They use it on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Right.
Oh God. Yeah, there's a few there that just died off, but I just thought it was interesting how they transcended gay culture and made it into everyday society.
Right. That's always the one of the interesting things you get about, you know, slang and subculture vernaculars is that often they will break containment and make their way into the wider world in some way, shape, or form.
So it didn't really take hold. Polarity didn't really take hold in the U.S., though a few words did.
Makes sense.
So let's see. Butch. Butch is one of them.
Yeah, that's right. That was one that I saw that I'd forgotten about. Yeah. So yeah, meaning exactly what it means to.
Right.
Yeah.
And then camp.
Do you have? Yeah, I was going to ask about camp because I wasn't sure how prominent that was in the US.
So yeah,
very.
So I mean, so like when they say like the 60s Batman show was very camp.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yep, it's very campy.
I mean, okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, but that's. I wonder if we get it called camp, first, or because of the whole like Batman Robin, that whole narrative.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Camp goes on to mean things like the Batman and Robin show, more broadly in pop culture.
I'd be interested. Yeah, that's interesting to think about.
Sort
how
of a
that...
chicken and the egg thing that I would.
Well, I don't know if it was called camp at the time, specifically in the US.
Yeah.
And you said it was travelers. It was specifically. It was basically carnies that started using it in the the 1500s, kind of in a way. Like is where the real origins of it, as far as like just kind of mixing, various dialects and languages to create this kind of mishmash language that only a certain subgroup understood.
Yeah, and it moved into other subcultures then, sort of in the Victorian era, in the 19th century. But because obviously the origins of Cockney rhyming slang is apparently that it's what criminals in the sort of East London underworld would use to speak to each other, so that they couldn't be overheard when planning a crime. And this was basically the same sort of idea, I guess. But
right.
Oh, so just one more thing I'm finding here that's interesting. It says that it's not really known for sure how it became, like how it kind of went, because at a certain point before the 1910s and 20s, it was just basically the language of anyone that was like an underclass person in Britain.
Huh.
So like if you were basically a street person, traveler, whatever, is like you use that language. But early 20th century is whenever it kind of crossed over to become more specifically an LGBTQ thing. And you want to guess who had a hand in that?
Who's that?
The drag queens.
That tracks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, they do kind of straddle both worlds in a way, right? Like, that's kind of interesting to think about.
Well, it also makes sense culturally speaking as well, because if you think about, there weren't that many people crossing the Atlantic, but the people that were would have been performers,
right?
And so if they were using the language and then going off to the States, or if sort of the mixing of those worlds, because obviously like we had Laurel and Hardy come over here and do tours of our theatre circuit and everything like that. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because I think people, certainly in the States, don't realize how mainstream drag culture was. Certainly at the moment, it seems, or the people who are against it are closing their eyes and ears to it. But
and it's kind of... Sorry.
I was just going to add, male drag was very common. Women dressed as men was very common in vaudeville,
right,
and in the music halls here.
Well, I mean, I see where a lot of it's like they're rewriting stuff as fascists do. They rewrite history and words and stuff. But like I've seen people legit just full on making the argument that drag is specifically about, you know, and you can tell what they mean is like how we think of drag queens now, like, you know, and that's all it is, right? Like that's what it looks like. It always looks like that. It's just a man dressed as a woman, wearing makeup and women's clothes, and that's what it is. But yeah, the thing I was just thinking about is like it's kind of crazy now with that context. Kind of interesting angle to look at how they're going after drag queens now, and I wonder if it's. I mean, it obviously is. It has something to do with the fact that they do kind of have a foot in you know, the straight world, so to speak, and then in the gay world, and it's almost like they see them as a gateway gay or something. Like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, and that if kids can have you know, a book read to them by a drag queen, well, the drag queen's just half a step away from, you know, the gay community. I don't know. I'm just trying to put myself in the.
It's hard to do with this one because it's just so incongruous. I mean, I guess drag culture has been more. It's gone off in its own direction in the last sort of couple of decades, whereas it was really mainstream TV and film before that. But yeah,
I remember in the 90s, my uncle used to do drag dance like once a month at this it was like a hula type bar type thing.
Nice.
Like he wore, you know, coconut boobs and a grass skirt and everything, and everybody was fucking cheering, and it was like, you know, it was awesome. It was a fun time, and nobody. And
I've seen people say like when it's like Mrs. Doubtfire or something like that, they'll say, "Oh well, no, that's just for comedy," and I'm like, "Have you been to a drag show? They're not serious performers, like 95% of the time."
Well, I think the truth of the matter is they have not been to a drag show, because it is, in most cases, when you think of a drag show, it's just an overtop affair. It's not specifically sexual as much as it is exaggerated.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, they're not to, you know, I mean, for the most part, no, they haven't, but some have, like Chrissy Mayer. She used to host a drag night, you know, just in the 2010s, and now she's doing, you know, fucking groomer shit on Friday Night Tights, and you know, talking about drag queens.
The fact of the matter is, it actually used to be far more serious and not played for laughs like it is now.
Right.
I wasn't expecting us to sort of go in this direction.
Sorry.
No, it's a good thing because I get to plug my latest video. The video I put up tonight is about a Sherlock Holmes episode called The Master Blackmailer. And one of the people that he blackmails is getting married, but has had a homosexual relationship with a drag performer. And there's a scene at a drag theatre, and it's people dressed as women singing songs, which is very common in drag performances, but there's no comedy element to it.
Right.
And the same for the women who were doing drag as men. A lot of those performances were just serious performances. I mean, Marlene Dietrich sort of made a reputation of it. Her most famous performances in Witness for the Prosecution. She does a male drag in that. So to say that this isn't woven into the fabric of entertainment, or to suggest that it's just for adults either, because
no, it's definitely not. Like it's pretty all. I mean, most of it's pretty all ages.
Yeah, I mean the stuff that happens in nightclubs, the comedy shows that are specifically for adults, are no different to seeing stand-up comedy,
right,
in a nightclub. Is that who they're going to target next? The stand-up comedians for getting sitcoms despite having adult material in their live shows? Because there's a lot of them on.
I mean,
the stand-up comedians are by and large going, in the direction of just saying what what righties want them to say.
The same shitty jokes. Yeah. Well, that said, you know what? If the modern moral panic was about how Big Bang Theory was ruining American society and destroying Western civilization, I might buy into that moral panic. I fucking hate that show.
Yeah, it's really it's blackface for nerds. It really is.
Well, I was just thinking Joe Rogan's opened that, or he's opening that Anything Goes comedy club where you can say whatever you want, which is pretty much like most comedy clubs. But anyway,
right.
Doing that though, and also having a podcast which isn't age restricted that kids can listen to, isn't that grooming if drag acts are?
Well, I mean, it's look, as we've made, as like DJ's made that point quite well in his content on Eric Debunks, is like these Phantom Menace guys that say this kind of shit, but then like their videos are not age restricted, and this is the kind of stuff they talk about. And then they have like Gavin McGinnis, and that's specifically why I titled put the thumbnail of that our mission statement as what it was originally. It was like they're political groomers, and that's why part of the reason I think they deflect and throw so much bullshit at queer people is because then nobody's really looking at them.
Right.
And what they're actually doing.
I mean, I'm sure both of you are online enough to be familiar with pedocon theory.
It's been being proven more and more like a real thing lately.
It really seems to be the case that a lot of these very loud anti-queer activists who like to throw around the word groomer are projecting. A lot of them either in the past have records of CSA or have been caught engaged in.
Yeah, was it like Ali Alexander, the guy that did the whole Stop the Steal movement?
Yep. Amongst several others. And it really is just projection and repackaging of, I mean, we're talking about this right now, like this whole like social contagion narrative was bunk science at the time it was pushed in the 50s, and they knew it was bunk science. They had done some science to figure it out and went, this is all bullshit, and then suppressed the results.
And it's bullshit now, because if they had stories about drag performers who were also being convicted for pedophilia, we wouldn't hear the end of it.
Right, we would never hear the end of it, but they can't find one.
No, and that's the weird thing. And I'm sure there probably are one or two out there. I mean,
that's what I was going to say. Timeline, let's be real. At some point, if this goes on long enough, they will find one.
Right.
Yeah.
And it will be all we hear about. It will be it'll be like Jussie Smollett all over again.
All over again, yep.
But to contrast that, not a day goes by when I don't see some either priest or sheriff or some sort of government official, conservative leaning, who is convicted.
Because by and large, just like by the nature of this thing, it is someone in a position of authority and power over others that is able to,
and
like grooming is not something you don't just like tap a person on, a kid on the shoulder. You're groomed. Like it takes time.
It's a process.
Being trusted by people, that are responsible for that kid to have that in your presence, right? Like it doesn't happen over a half-hour drag show.
No.
Their complete ethos is backwards. People who are drag performers do not do book readings because they're pedophiles, because those events are so incredibly supervised that it wouldn't make any logical sense. But if you are a pedophile, you gravitate towards positions that allows you pretty much free access to kids, like the priesthood, like politicians, and like law enforcement officials, where the position is trusted.
And also in a lot of places where that comes to pass that way, there's a you trust them, but also a culture of silence when it comes to any discussion of sexual issues, which is why they're so opposed to things like basic sex education, right? They don't want to give you the words to talk about it so that, this trusted figure can do whatever they want to you. And a kid doesn't have the language necessary to explain it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's why, like, I remember when She-Hulk ended, and like, I guess one of the writers did an interview and talked about how they wanted to be able to do a sex positive show that kids could watch.
Right.
And Chud's fucking lost it at that because they don't know what those words mean. They think sex positive means just like, oh, fuck anything that moves,
Right.
When it's like, by and large, like 95% of sex positivity is based around the concept of consent. And
consent and communication, right? It's
consent and communication, and like that no, you don't, it's of course it's up to parents and it's contextual and stuff like that. Like, but I've talked about it before, but my kid, we had a early version of the talk when they were 11, because they were, started going through puberty and stuff. And like, at that point, I'd rather them be aware of like what, they got to understand their boundaries, right? Like, and whatnot. And that makes them safer. It doesn't make them, like poisoned by knowledge or something like that. So if you do
this crazy idea that if you teach kids about sex, they'll go and have sex. It's like, no, kids will go and have sex whether you teach them about it or not.
I have heard that out of people I know who got knocked up or knocked someone up in high school. And it's like, point of order.
Yeah.
No one gave you the talk and you went and got your ass knocked up, or you went and knocked someone up. Like,
yeah. Pregnancy rates in like teenage pregnancy rates in like the South and in fucking
way
rural
higher
communities and stuff where they're actively suppressed and removed sex education stuff. It's absurd.
Because it turns out humans, they're DTF, like, on the regular.
And it's not like, because it's not like baking a cake. You don't You don't need specific instructions to get it right. No, it's pretty much self-explanatory.
If you've ever put like a Capri Sun, a straw in a Capri Sun, you know what to do.
And yet, the right are really against banning plastic straws. Coincidence?
That's going to be the new sex education. All right, kids, we're going to talk about Capri Sun and
look,
getting liquid everywhere.
Really tricky to get. I used to really suck it when I was a kid. Like, I would get so mad because I couldn't get the straw would bend, and like, oh god, that's terrible when that happens.
I got to be honest, it is worse now with the paper straws. They are difficult now, but I think they're getting rid of the straws completely.
Yeah, a lot of places just have the sippy cup lid. The coffee place we go to has these wonderful, I think it's like a bioplastic straw, and they are like the best of both worlds, because like it's not like a paper straw that gets all soggy right away.
Yeah, it's weird
because that weird plasticky flavor. Like, they're great. I love them.
I can remember when I was in school, I had a pen that was the plastic exterior was made out of corn.
Oh, neat.
So I don't know what happened to that, whether it was cost prohibitive. But again, with America's corn economy, I can't believe that's not something that...
Make it out of fucking corn.
I mean, it's probably something similar to like how the electric car has existed for decades, but
as we all know from the Naked Gun series, it's the oil companies that have been suppressing that technology.
It's true. Well, and now you've got a guy who's selling carbon credits to sell explosive cars, sort of leading that industry.
By the way, if you listen to one of the inspirations in my mind for this podcast, of the two podcasts that I listen to regularly for years before doing this one, so there's one of them is Behind the Bastards, the other one is QAnon Anonymous. But Behind the Bastards is currently doing an Elon Musk series. They just finished their Vince McMahon series, and holy shit, that guy's a fucking monster. But now they're doing Elon Musk is being sued. It's not the first time they've covered Elon Musk. It's specific to him buying Twitter and stuff like that.
Him being on the hook for a stupid amount of money.
And and so they're talking about how moving into Twitter and like getting it off the ground and like the transition team and stuff. People that were like from OG Twitter that he was holding over, at least for the time being, and how he was asking them, like the building manager, to do all this crazy shit, like, because they had people sleeping in the building, because they were
right,
and so he was asking them to like build some hotel rooms in the building, and that's like against code, and they were like, It doesn't matter, they're telling the building manager, just don't tell them, and then like also hire unlicensed electricians if the licensed ones won't do this job. And,
I love that.
And then also whenever you wouldn't do that, just telling the building manager, then you do it. You need to rig this and it's like, I'm not an electrician. And he's like, I don't care, just do it. And like you have to wonder, is that the same kind of practice that leads to fucking exploding cars and fucking exploding rockets?
Yes, that is exactly how that works. Like for SpaceX, it's a little different because NASA is pretty involved in their day-to-day, and they're heavily reliant on NASA for infrastructure and research.
Okay.
So they can't push that too much, but with Tesla, I would absolutely imagine, based on everything I've seen and read, that, well, a lot of the people that were involved in the transition from Elon's side at Twitter were from Tesla, and it sounds like it was run the same way.
Well, yeah, just it's a culture that I'm sure that he instills just by nature of being Elon Musk, and people that work for him probably worship him.
Well, here's my thinking about it, and I don't think this is an angle I've seen, but I've seen that he cites The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as one of his favorite books, or maybe his favorite book. Possibly, yeah. He's probably listened to the audiobook, but what that gets to me is that when most people read that book, they think it's a very funny book, and a lot of the jokes are based about this technology that can't possibly exist.
Right.
And that's the joke. It's such a ridiculous thing. Not only can't it exist, but you wouldn't want it to exist.
You wouldn't want it to exist, right? Like that's
Whereas when Elon reads that sort of stuff, he thinks, "Oh, let's try and make that." His first instinct is, "We can make that," and then just throws a huge amount of money at making it. Like the brain chip thing. He doesn't want to do that to better humanity. He wants to create the Babel fish.
Right. Oh my God, you're absolutely right, Ryan. You're amazing.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Because I've been one of the things that, again, plugging myself here, but one of the things we're going to be doing soon is a series about one-season wonders, so TV series that never got past one season, but that probably should have. And one of the ones I'm covering is the BBC Dirk Gently series.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't know if many people saw that because it was only 4 episodes, and then Netflix came along and did their version. But it's completely.
Oh no! Wait, which one? Which one did I see? I saw the one
Netflix
with
version.
The one with the what's his name's daughter in it.
Brad Dourif.
Dourif, yeah.
Yeah, that's the American one, which is what part of the reason I want to get this out there. But in 2010 and 2012, the BBC produced 4 episodes with I'm trying to think if you would know the lead from anything. Stephen Mangan's his name. I don't think he's been in any American films, to be honest. But anyway, it's a big departure from the Douglas Adams books, like the Netflix series was, but still keeps bits and pieces and sort of retains the overall tone. So I've been looking at that, and one of the things in it, which I think I mentioned on the Discord, is there's a computer program in it called Reason, where in order to justify something, like now they use computer modeling to say this would be a good idea. But the Reason program does the reverse. So you tell it what you want it to do, and then it comes up with a reason to do it. So
literally post hoc. Oh my god, I love it.
Yeah, so if you want to invade Switzerland, you tell the computer program, give me a reason to invade Switzerland, and it will develop one, which is and the joke in the novel is that the Pentagon, the program is a failure because the Pentagon pretty much snaps it up and stops anybody else having access to it.
Right.
But it looks like they've been using it for foreign policy for the last sort of
I mean, I was
few
gonna
years.
say, like that sounds like that's how like a narcissist brain works. Where it's like just doing the content that I've been doing for a few years now. Like I noticed that, a recurring thing where it's just like these guys that tend to be grifters or often have a very kind of narcissistic kind of a vibe to them, and they'll just like do and say shit, and then there's like all this work after the fact to justify it, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's like those stages of they didn't say that,
right. Or that they did, but this is why it's okay that this was what, and there's like this whole narrative why that attempts to justify it.
Yeah, exactly. That whole thing. Yeah. So if you had a computer program where you could just say like, because the example they give again in the book, at the end of the TV episode is that for bizarre reasons, unknown reasons, America has invaded Mexico. And then the news is reporting about all the justifications for it and why it's everyone across the world agrees that it's perfectly fine.
And it's just the Trump campaign messaging.
Pretty much.
No, this predates Trump. That's the scary thing about it.
Like 10 years before, 6 years before.
It predates the sort of advances in AI that we've seen recently, and Trump and all of this stuff. Yeah, it's once the review is out, look out for it. And the whole series is available on Netflix. If you just Google, not Netflix. It's the whole series is available on YouTube. If you search on YouTube for just Dirk Gently,
right.
But yeah, well worth watching. The first episode, the pilot episode, is particularly clever in how it sort of messes with things, and it's really funny as well. Helen Baxendale's in it. I think she's probably one of the few people that American audiences might recognize. But,
so, Morgan, let me ask you, how far off of the track have we gotten?
Well, we hit the end of the track a while ago, so
okay.
We are in FAP time, so
all right.
We can do heroes and villains.
It's a nice cool down period after a nice FAP, yeah.
Yeah, because we were pretty on track with the sort of post information commentary, and then now we've just wandered.
Yeah, we've wandered. So let's talk heroes and villains.
Heroes and villains. Are there any heroes here?
I have two heroes. We'll do our villains first because we like to end on a high note.
Everybody.
Fucking the United States government. Every elected official in the 50s. Fuck all of them with a cactus.
For real, was there nobody? I guess there was not a single person that would have spoken against this, right?
Not as far as I can tell, there was no discernible pushback from it. Everyone just kind of went along with it because the infrastructure for, getting people out of the government was in place, and it was weaponized so efficiently that it was just fucked.
Well, I guess it was the perfect climate that meant that nobody could speak, because if you spoke up against it, you'd be accused.
Exactly.
Right.
And they would do that, right? People did try to speak up, and then they were dragged out of their job, basically. So fuck all of that. And that's a special fuck you to President Eisenhower for signing that executive order. Like, you're Dwight D. fucking Eisenhower. You are in the 50s. You are invincible in the American political climate because you won the goddamn war. The buck stopped there, right? You put that into place. We like to talk about Joseph McCarthy, Hardy Har, villain from Wisconsin, and yes, he's a fuckboy, and I'm glad he's dead.
Hey, watch out with that kind of language. People.
Oh yeah, there's some people are gonna get upset on Discord or whatever. I don't care. I don't have a YouTube channel. I can't get canceled.
I mean, you kind of do though. Like you kind of do at this point. Okay, sorry.
It's collateral damage on you. I'll be fine.
Here with me apparently.
Yeah, it'll be your problem. So yeah, fuck Dwight Eisenhower for that. The buck stops with you. You're the president. You could have done something, and you didn't. And you let it ruin our government for 75 years. So.
And then not just government too, right? Because like that's definitely played a huge role just culturally in the attitudes of that we're just now starting to break past. That there's a lot of people that are really forcing some adversity toward it.
Yep, and it goes on to this day. For our heroes, we've got two. I'm gonna give a rare win to Barack Obama, who, after 70 some years, realized, wait a minute, the buck fucking does stop with me, and canceled the executive order that had been in place since the 50s. Someone had to do it, and I'm glad he did it. Lots of things we can criticize Obama for, but it's the right thing to do, and he did it. So, our last hero is Joseph McCarthy's liver.
Nice.
Which did the right thing.
American hero.
And killed him.
I would like to add one. Just
sure, hit it.
If we're in the process of calling at least for the moment in specific examples tepid Democrats heroes.
Yes, we are.
Joe Biden is the first president to acknowledge the lavender scare in the way that
that's true.
It's the first thing I saw when I looked it up. Was like, holy shit, he just kind of was pretty recent. And I mean, and in a way, like same thing with like, I don't know, it doesn't cost Joe Biden very much to make that proclamation at this point. It's not like a huge political loser for him, so it's not like he shouldn't get too much credit,
but it's worth calling out that at least finally in the history of the American government, the president acknowledged this happened. They are on the case. Spitting facts over there.
They fucking shot him with some blue lasers. And some alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, a lot of alcohol poison. Also, like, I'm going to take a second here to shit on Joseph McCarthy. Joe, if you're listening, you're from Wisconsin. The great asterisk state of Wisconsin. We have one thing everyone knows us for, and it's our fucking drinking. And you couldn't fucking handle your liquor and not get fucking liver disease?
Pussy.
Wimp, coward, failure.
Also don't forget the cheese though.
Oh, but cheese is delicious.
I mean, that's what I think of because I'm not like a huge beer fan, but like, man,
right? Oh, we
delicious ass cheese.
And like, if you are in Wisconsin, hit me up on Discord. 2, cheese curds. If you're ever up here, like, you got to get the cheese curds.
There's like, I resisted because I lived there for like almost a year, and like people, you tried cheese curds, and I'm like, no, that sounds disgusting. They're not.
They're not. No.
So I resisted for a while, and then I tried it.
And you knew that we actually went to a place not far from here that has my spouse's favorite cheese curds, and like every time is the first time for them. They're just like, oh, this is the best.
And you could say that I forced adversity to cheese curds for a while.
You did. You had a moral panic about cheese curds. I mean,
That's disgusting. It's unnatural.
You know what? This is an anti-Packers podcast, Debbie. I'm sorry. I don't adhere to the state religion. I believe in the separation of church and state. I believe we can not like the Green Bay Packers. Controversial, I know. All right. Well, did we speed run the lavender scare?
Yeah. I think this is record time for a topic, maybe.
This is record time, I think.
I mean, considering we really finished like 15, 20 minutes ago, too.
We did.
I think we covered everything well. I'm proud of us for not getting too derailed on it.
Well, thank you to you as well, Ryan, because you laid a lot of the groundwork with your Red Spear episode. So, kind of
you set it on the tee for me, and I just knocked it out there. Do you guys have T-ball over there?
Not really. I mean,
okay.
it exists, but it's not. It's not huge.
Yeah. Well.
What do we got next? What's next?
Let's check the Discord. We can talk about what's next.
Checking.
I know we've got in 2 weeks we've got a special guest to talk about Florida once again.
Oh, so we're going to talk about banning some books.
So
we talked about book burning before.
Yeah, we have.
But and I'm sure I think we got into a little bit of the banning aspect too, because like the banning is often a precursor to the burning.
Right.
But there's a lot of specific books that have been banned and are attempting to, attempts to ban them in the last couple of years, and I think it's worth probably getting into which books exactly and why, maybe.
And the history of book burnings and book bannings, like not just a contemporary thing, but like great book panics throughout history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, going back to probably, I guess, like, what was it? The Protestant
Reformation.
Yeah, like basically, because that was like, for the longest time, the Bible was basically the only book that anybody had.
Well, actually, before the Protestant Reformation, they didn't even have that.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that
the rich people had books. They just weren't mass produced. They weren't produced like with a printing press.
But if I can drop British history for a little bit here, and
absolutely
German history, because the Gutenberg Bible was the first one sort of mass produced. But before printing presses, people couldn't read, and it was actively discouraged reading because you went to the priest. And the priest would read from the Bible, and the priest could say whatever they wanted and would not be fact-checked on it.
That kind of sounds like what we talked about on my show Friday with anti-intellectualism.
Well, yes, this was entirely about control, because they wouldn't print the Bible in English. So if you could read English, which a lot of people could, but far fewer people could read Latin. And so the Bible had to be written in Latin, and it was only the priests really that learned Latin. I mean, it was completely a method of control, So that the Bible was actually in the beginning. Sorry, that was not on purpose, but in the beginning, the Bible was actually a great leveler in terms of reading. And there was a great opposition to it being produced in English.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got is the Harry Potter episode still up on the channel, Dane?
No, because I've been very, very busy and distracted. But
Dane.
Very soon, as in starting this week, I'll be back on top of uploading things. It's a priority.
So look forward to our live stream of the Harry Potter book burnings from a few months ago. Back up on, will it be on this channel or on the Forced Adversity podcast channel?
I'll probably do like a clip from it on here. That's what I'm going to probably generally do when I upload, is a clip from the episode on here, and then kind of upload the whole thing there.
Sweet.
Yeah. Just been in a holding pattern. Frustrating holding pattern.
I feel ya.
But yeah, we're gonna have Willow questing refuge on in 2 weeks, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm excited for that.
Me too.
Haven't had them on in quite a while, and they've undergone some a journey that I think is interesting and awesome. So.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about Florida centrism and some trans joy to wrap up Pride Month.
Trans joy.
Yay!
So yeah, be here for that, but also be here next week for banning books because we talk about the funnest stuff around here.
Great book bannings in history.
I can talk about some of my own personal experience with having books that I owned banned by the authoritarians called my stepmother and father when I was a kid.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know if that's relevant, but
I think it might be.
And I will look into any British book bannings because off the top of my head, nothing leaps to mind. But we must have done it.
It's the UK. You've done it at some point. I will be shocked.
We learned it from watching you.
Not everything. Some ideas. America is the melting pot, so you didn't get all your bad ideas from us.
Sounds like a cop-out. But yeah, no. So yeah, I announced it earlier, but it's worth announcing again. And actually, I'll pull up a good old graphic for it.
Yay, graphics!
Helps sell the point, I think.
While Dane is pulling up the graphic, if you have not yet, like the video. If you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. And if you like Dane, you can give him money on Patreon.
That's the thing you can do. I did add a $3 tier. So for $3 you can go. And I'm gonna really be trying to do like regular stuff, like the watch party we talked about. If we do that for Secret Invasion, that'll be for patrons and stuff. Yeah. But the hell did I do with that thing? God damn it, Dane. Kill some more time for me.
Kill more time. All right. So first, to kill time, you need to steal a time machine. But not a TARDIS, because fuck Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, really.
That guy.
Somebody's going to have to do a forced adversity against me and you, I think. About that one. Yeah, Friends of Garrick. Fundraiser exploring LGBTQ plus representation in Star Trek. And one interesting feature of this is that Turf Nation has never seen a Star Trek. But he's a
coward.
He's been assigned one, and he's going to be watching it, and he's also going to be watching some Jesse Gender videos that I linked. Because when it comes to Star Trek and gay stuff, like I don't really know any better authority.
Jesse is the authority. She is rad, and if you have not checked out her channels, do that too.
I of course thought of that. She's just really busy doing a lot of stuff. Like she does a lot of stuff for like big channels and stuff, and it's like, man,
she's got 2 channels of her own and a never-ending cavalcade of assholes harassing her.
Right. And I mean, the only thing is, like, I know she knows who I am. I've spoken, exchanged some messages before. She did a reading for a quote in a video a couple of years ago. That was pretty awesome because I was like, hey, I know you probably don't know her. She's like, no, I know who you are. I like her videos. And I was like, oh my god, I cried.
Dane got the vapors.
If you do want to find a little bit more about Garrick, I see 75 YBA has said that Andrew Robinson was spoken about in an interview. I don't know if it was the interview, but he was interviewed on the Shuttlepod show, and that's something they cover there, as well as his frightening turn as the Scorpio killer in the first Dirty Harry film, and then Hellraiser. Which again is,
it's like it's obvious, but I don't think about it because it's like they're kind of such different characters too.
Right. He's got some range. Makeup. Him and Alexander Siddig did a live reading of some DS9 fan fiction that is very wholesome.
Here's what I want to see. And is why are we not getting an update? Like, whatever show it needs to be in. I mean, they've been bringing other characters back in Picard and whatnot. You had 7 of 9 in Picard. Like, can we just get like a scene where we see that they actually Bashir and Garrick, they just settle down together.
It would be nice.
And it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just like they're old, they're hanging out in their cabin or some shit.
Just
I don't know.
Go to DS9, like it's still there. They go there in what's it called? The show I don't care for. Lower Decks.
You don't care for Lower? Okay, we're adding that to the What the fuck?
Yes.
I mean, we're already going to be talking about your weird Star Trek takes, so.
Yep.
It is weird how they sort of ignored DS9 in modern Trek.
It's always been the red-headed stepchild because it's got such a different formula.
Well, I mean, Picard has part of its plot literally picks up on the Dominion.
Yeah.
And,
well, yeah, but then the shapeshifters in that, and the connection is not as like I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's not as solid as like the obvious Voyager connection is with not just 7 of 9, but the other.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we could say that the character growth that Worf underwent in Deep Space Nine was pretty fucking profound, and I could see how that being a connection to how he is in Picard.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah,
sort of because he gets more development in DS9 than he ever did in TNG.
100%. Yeah, has some like his absolute best episodes. Worf episodes are in DS9.
Yeah,
I just still can't get over how they overlooked Miles O'Brien.
I can't either.
Who did?
Picard. I think the one reason I can think of, well, two. I have two reasons that they didn't bring him back for Picard season 3. One, is that they didn't have time to fit in their tight episode schedule an O'Brien Must Suffer episode, which you need if you're going to have him in a series, right? He's got to suffer one episode. And then two, anything Geordi can do, he can do better. So like he solves the plot by virtue of O'Briening at it.
True.
It just would have been nice if they'd mentioned how he couldn't be there or something,
right.
Well,
I mean, he definitely would have taken up all the gravity, all the oxygen in the room, and then Lower Decks did give him pretty great honor, though.
The statue, yeah. Yeah, Strange New Worlds is having the crossover with Lower Decks, and I'm actually looking forward to that. Lower Decks, okay, so I should probably... Okay, I've upset some people, and I know I'm going to get canceled, so I'm going to try and apologize so Dane's YouTube channel doesn't get reported or whatever. It's not that I hate Lower Decks, and I've watched the whole first season. It's just not for me.
I've heard transphobes kind of say the same thing about trans people. I don't know. I'm just saying. Sorry, that's a low blow.
I mean, they don't have to watch me on TV, and I don't have to watch Lower Decks on TV. If we could just agree to that, right? Like, I just ignore Lower Decks, and they don't send threatening hordes to schools in different districts. Like, that could be an acceptable peace treaty.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think Morgan's trying to legislate against Lower Decks. So
right.
That is, yeah. Okay, so things are different than other things. I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Somebody said that one time, and I was like, I don't know if that's
right.
True.
Yeah, I'm not legislating against Lower Decks. Like most shows I don't like, I just don't watch it.
True. So, also another thing. So Wednesday. So the Friends of Garrick stream is Thursday. Wednesday, we are, we announced already we were going to be having a guest, Dean Page. He's been on before with his comic, Jake Sunrise, about the werewolf cowboy. Promoted that quite a bit because it's awesome. Well, he's got a new comic coming out called Cosmo Natalia, and it is more of an adult type comic book. At least there's the not safe for work version with boobies and stuff. And it's just like a gorgeous looking book. I've read the first few pages. And the coloring on it is really fucking awesome. Like, it stands out to me. And we're going to have him on. And we're also going to be talking about, and this was just decided right before the stream, basically, that we're going to be talking about this #ComicsBrokeMe situation. It's people talking about a situation that has existed essentially since the beginning of comics. And I've talked about it with like Siegel and Schuster in my Superman video. And it's just an ongoing thing that persists to this day. There was a creator who recently passed away. I'm not familiar with his work, but apparently he was very beloved. And he basically just died, like a lot of these people do, broke and too young. And with despite, like, for example, I found a tweet by someone who's, and I guess I saw some legit people responding to it, so I assume it is legit. But I don't know who this person is off the top of my head. But they said, I took a job as a housekeeper in a care facility. Don't get me wrong, it's good work and I'm glad to have it, but I have 3 Eisners to my name. I can't even get an interview for a comics job. Which is just one expression of many under that hashtag on Twitter, if you go look, of just how fucking wrecked the comics industry is for workers, to the people that literally create this stuff.
Yep.
And especially whenever you get into talking about like Marvel and DC, these billion-dollar franchises and whatnot, and
right.
It gets especially upsetting.
Yeah, they can afford to pay these people, but
so there's that.
Yeah, and
that'll be Wednesday. Sure be a bit of good conversation with Dean about creating comic, and then also some of that upsetting, but it'll be like a good way to say, hey, look, support creator own comics, because comics creators are awesome.
And I'm sure you'll be covering as well how it's weird that sort of people who are against Marvel and DC for other reasons don't have a problem with it. Never talk about it.
Well, I mean, look. So the only thing is with that is that there is a certain person who is the muse of this podcast who almost certainly will and is already talking about it.
Right.
But it goes back to what we were saying earlier with that one example of like he will use it to make his point for his specific purposes. I've seen him do that before. He talked about Siegel and Schuster once, and it was like the tweets about it. He was spot on. It's like, man, I hate when you say something like this where I'm like, you're absolutely right with all of this, because I know the motive for it is not the same as what it should be.
Right. He's not bringing it up to raise everyone else up. He's trying to get attention for him. And
just like, knock down the comics industry in general. He doesn't give a shit about the creators that it's actually affecting still.
I mean, how many books is he behind on his crowdfunding releases?
I think he's just kind of getting one out now. But I mean, the important metric I think to look at with him is that he's gotten 3 issues of comic book out in, I think, what is it, the 6 years since he's been fired?
Something like that.
It barely qualifies as a comics creator, in my opinion.
I mean,
nonetheless.
Yeah.
But it is true, Ryan. That like, the people that want to shit all over this stuff all the time, and they do, they're not, and this is really kind of one of the tragic parts of it is that, like, yes, there's people that are bullied and victimized and fans and stuff like that, but like we can't even really have legit conversations about the actual issues with the industry, because for one, the oxygen's being taken up by these guys, and also if they do allow it to be talked about, they're talking about it for these reasons instead of like the betterment of the industry and workers' rights.
Right.
Anyway, I do have something positive to close us out on.
Yay!
And it relates to what we were talking about a minute ago with old O'Brien.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, he got his due on Lower Decks. They said that he's like the most important person in history or the Federation.
Right, yeah, something like that.
He had a golden statue. No context yet. I don't know if we'll ever get it.
That might be part of the joke.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, also you kind of sense why it's true anyway.
Right, in your heart.
He suffered for us and for the Enterprise a lot.
Yeah, Miles O'Brien has suffered for our sins.
But he has gotten, he's gotten his due in another respect. He got a very high honor in another show that is currently returned from its hiatus with a new season, and that's what I'll leave you with.
All right.
There's a lot of seeds.
His mission, the Pincana, Charlie.
Tabronim, Achni Higam Cotter to Reuter got. Is Fiddlem Gibberish Halev Achni Fiddlem Ia Lowert?
Kill the shin. She Lowert and Ish.
No, Shimo Gahar Moharapin.
Nileen Irna La Shinovik.